by the end of this course, you will have a better understanding and familiarity with the Montana Common Core standards, and you will gain a deeper understanding of what the standards are. This course will hopefully help you understand how you can use evidence from assessments to meet the expectations of these standards. So here we've got a variable sheet, and in this we're looking specifically at a passage, and the passage title is given up here. The author's name is inserted here. We're reviewing for what sort of text type is this in a description of the passage. So for instance, The Little Great White is an informational passage, and it is trying to convey information to the reader. We need to go through and give qualitative judgments to this passage, so that includes the purpose, the text structure, whether or not there's any particular features of this text we should be aware of, the use of graphics, language features, is the vocabulary tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. We're going to look at the knowledge demands of this passage. Is any prior knowledge necessary in order for students to be able to understand and comprehend the information being conveyed in this passage? We're also going to use the quantitative measures of this passage to see if this fits within the grade expectations. And then we're going to make notes about the considerations we should have for choosing this passage. So down here are some potential challenges that could be incorporated into our consideration for this passage selection. For instance, is it an accessible text, or is it too complex that it's difficult for the reader to engage with the material? What sort of sentence and text structures does it have? Is there archaic language or slang, idioms, and other challenges that the reader should be aware of? What sort of background knowledge does the reader need to have to be able to comprehend the material of this passage? Are there any other bias or sensitivity issues we should be aware of when implementing this passage in our classroom? What is the word count? Is it too long for our intended purposes? And after we have gone through and looked at the qualitative and quantitative aspects and made our teacher judgments, so the considerations for this passage, we'll give an overall text complexity measure. So we're going to use this sheet when we're going through the work here in PAO Instruction to help us make informed decisions about where passages from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, where they fit within the Montana Common Core standards. Here is an example of the variable sheet that we will use when we are making judgments about the individual items that correspond to the passage. So some things we need to focus on is how we believe the item fits to each of the Montana Common Core areas. And in that we need to also elucidate evidence that we can use to support our judgment. And we would put that in this section here, where the evidence from the prompt helped us make a decision where we think this item fits. And any other comments, so things we need to consider when using this item. This would be an example of a primary item variable sheet. You can notice that there's the foundational skill for K through 5. And so when you're reviewing any secondary items, this row will actually be removed from the sheet you're using, but for the purposes of this introduction into the variable sheet, we've left it in there. So what grade is most appropriate for this item? And we would put the grade we think it fits. So let's say we're reviewing an item and we think it's most appropriate for grade 2. Based on the standard that we're indicating down here, how well we think this fits in the grade 2 band. In some aspects it might have a complete alignment, or we may be in full agreement that the item fits. However, there may be instances where it is somewhat addressed but not entirely covered, and that's where we get this fitness scale here, and so 0 to 3. We want to know what Montana Common Core strand is most appropriate for this item. We also want to know what college and career ready standard is being met with this item. We want to know specifically what standard is being addressed. In some cases, you may be able to go directly to what standard is most appropriate for this item. However, there are instances where the standard will be too fine a grain judgment for us to make, and we're only able to get to the granularity of the college and career ready standards, or maybe in some cases we're only to place it within the strand. However, if you feel it's easier to jump immediately to the standard and you have a standard that is in good agreement with your decision, you can go here as opposed to going top down, grade to strand to college career ready standard to standard. For the item, we would also want to know what language features are being addressed with the item, and so are there any Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 level words that are being addressed in the item. Some of the NAEP items will be vocabulary specific questions, and so this would be an area where we really want to emphasize what is being measured here, and in this case we want to denote what tier is being assessed here. Also with the Common Core, we have more rigorous standards, and with that we want to make sure that we can assess what is the depth of knowledge that a student needs to have, or how complex is this task. So what sort of content knowledge do they need to know to be able to respond appropriately to the item. We also want to know the revised Bloom's taxonomy, so how difficult is the task. Both of these cognitive taxonomies are necessary in order to make a decision about how rigorous the item is and what sort of knowledge and abilities does the student need to have in order to successfully or proficiently master the expectations of this question.